Hughes. I'm a Sandler trainer, and I haven't been live on LinkedIn for a couple of weeks, so I thought I've got a few things that it might be of some kind of value to share. So I thought I'll go live and see what might be of use to some of you out there. So I've got a few things coming up where I'm going to be running some free masterclasses. Now, the next one I've got is actually next week. It's next Thursday. It's I think the 8th of December. That's completely subscribed at the moment. That's completely full. But I do have a number of these things coming up over the next couple of months. So I thought I'd just share with you a few of the sorts of common challenges that these masterclasses seek to help people to address. And why it is that we even do these things, because there are so many things in so many different walks of life, so many different industries, so many different industry verticals, where actually the challenges that we face are surprisingly similar to one another. I've had clients who are, I suppose, solo entrepreneur, HR experts or health and safety experts or marketing experts or whatever, right through to people who are in large multinational companies, 300 million pound turnover, absolutely phenomenal professional services companies. And yet, weirdly, some of the challenges they face are the same. And that's largely because where these challenges come from is really the same. And they come from our experience. They come from the things that we've learned or been taught by stuff that happens to us in our lives. Sometimes just simple stuff like when you go to buy a car. Who hasn't gone to buy a car at some stage? The experience you have when you're going to buy a car teaches you what it's like to be in a buyer-seller relationship. And sometimes that can be quite pleasant. Other times, not so much. Sometimes it can feel like the seller is somewhat self-interested and so forth. And in fact, very often what I do when I talk in these masterclasses about business development, about growth, about, well, what really does come down to sales and selling stuff and generating new selling relationships, particularly in business to business, where there's an element of the consultative, an element of the trusted advisor relationship that you need to buy, where you are, and please do forgive my terrible phraseology here, you're selling for a marriage, not just for a wedding night. You're actually after a long-term relationship, ideally predicated on equal business stature, where you end up with, I suppose, a relationship which both parties kind of understand the value that the other party brings, and they have respect for one another, mutual respect for one another. And that kind of a relationship is something which is quite hard to establish, and it's not always something which automatically comes to mind when you think of the word sales. So in these masterclasses, very often I will do a bit of word association, and I will say something like, okay, think of the first adjective that comes to your brain when I say this next word, and it might be that I say the word doctor. And very often I'll go around the room or around the Zoom or around the Teams, usually Zoom, and I'll say doctor, and people will come up with things like professional and supportive and caring and expert and all those kinds of words. And maybe some of those words have even come to your mind now as I've said it. And then I'll do the same thing, but I'll say the word salesperson. Just imagine what kinds of words come out. Now, occasionally I'll get somebody who's a professional salesperson in there, and they'll say expert, adds value. And we'll all have a bit of a chuckle, because even the person who's saying that kind of knows that actually that's not the way that salespeople are perceived, rightly or wrongly. Hopefully, and I'm sure it is the case for you, wrongly. Okay, because actually the stereotype, the perception is not good. The words that almost always come out are things like pushy, sleazy, self-interested, commission-breathed, unpleasant words like that. Now, I'm not saying that all salespeople are like that. I'm saying this is the stereotype, and therefore we have to be aware of that stereotype, and we have to deal with it. If you don't believe what I'm saying, then actually, I think it was McKinsey did some research earlier in 2021, around the way in which business to business, B2B buyers perceive salespeople. And the vast majority, sad to say, kind of echoed those sentiments, echoed that phraseology of pushy and sleazy and self-interested and everything else. I'm going to share my screen here and move past this and look at what is absolutely vital for building a relationship. And it is really about building trust. But that McKinsey data says that actually 97% of buyers, 97%, either distrust or actively don't trust salespeople. So on some level, B2B buyers don't trust salespeople, which is a sad indictment of our profession, because ultimately we're all in sales. If you're client facing and you're responsible for the growth of your business, then on some level you're in sales, and that's something we all have to deal with. And maybe, who knows, maybe you've even got some, I suppose, some negative perceptions around what it means to be in sales, which might even mean that it's difficult sometimes to even express your own value proposition, because it feels like you're blowing your own trumpet, and it feels kind of a bit icky and a bit unpleasant to have to talk about these things, because it feels salesy. Yeah. And that certainly can come across that way. So it's really important to be able to establish a proper relationship, a relationship of equal business stature, as I said earlier on. So how do people do that? And how do they do it quickly? Because if you've ever read any of any works by any FBI hostage negotiators, or anybody who goes into life or death situations where actually building trust is essential, because if you don't build that trust, then somebody will die. Now, fortunate to say that mostly in sales, certainly in business to business sales, it's very rarely life or death. But it's still certainly important that we recognize what it takes to build trust. And actually, what they say is that you have, on average, 7 seconds to gain trust. 7 seconds. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. What can you say in 7 seconds? Well, even if you talk at the speed that I talk, not a lot. So it's got to be about something other than what you say. It's got to be about how you say it. It's got to be about how you show up. It's certainly not about what an awful lot of businesses tend to go out and, or at least arm their salespeople with. Because it's more about the conviction with which you turn up, and the genuine belief and the authenticity of that, and your genuine interest in the other person, rather than something which is somewhat self-serving. So what do salespeople typically get armed with? Because, you know, if you train to be a doctor, like the analogy I gave you earlier on, if you train to be a doctor, you've probably trained for 7 years or more to do really quite complex work, to be able to diagnose what's wrong with somebody and then to prescribe some form of a cure. But if you're a salesperson, you'll be lucky if maybe you get a day's product and features and benefits type training, and then sent out into the big wide world to go and form new relationships with people. But forming relationships is difficult. It's very difficult. If you've ever tried to form a relationship with somebody from scratch, even outside of the world of business to business, let's say you want to meet a life partner. So you know, in the days before the internet, yes, I am that old, before that happened, you know, you would go out for an evening and you would sort of strike up a conversation with somebody, you know, whether it's in a bar or it's wherever it is. Okay. And if you strike up a conversation and you say, hey, I'm great, you know, I'm absolutely fantastic. I've got this, I've got that, I've got this job. I earn this amount of money. You should see my car. It's amazing. Oh, wow. It's fantastic. And I mean, fit, very, very fit. I look after myself, you know, healthy. My goodness me. I tell you what, the breeding potential with somebody with my DNA, absolutely magnificent. I think the chances of you actually being successful in building that relationship by walking up and talking about your features and benefits, probably going to be quite unsuccessful. In fact, if you were successful, I would argue that probably the person that you've actually managed to pull, forgive the phrase, is probably not somebody you really want to build a long-term relationship with you, because they're interested in you for all the wrong reasons. Simple rule, try to be interested in them before you try to be interesting to them. So what is the equivalent of that we're sending salespeople out into the world with? Well, I mean, the first thing is, and I see this with salespeople, I see it with business owners, I see it with anybody who's maybe got that head trash around how to kind of start these relationships. You know, they look at how they can build trust, but these are common delusions. Okay, so if you listen out for any of these things or anything similar to this, then I'd really, really value an introduction to people who kind of are living in this world where they say these things to themselves, or they believe these things. So the first thing is, If I show them how passionate I am, it'll set me apart from my competitors. Now, passion is important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting for a second that you should not be passionate about what you do. I am suggesting that it's something that you show evidence of through your behavior, not something that you say. You know, I'd always be worried about somebody who says, "Oh, I'm dead passionate, me, dead passionate about what I do. I'm ever so passionate." Doesn't come across as genuine, does it? Doesn't come across as real. You know, you're either passionate or you're not, and people will be able to tell if you've got genuine passion. What I'd say is that if you go in there and show off your passion too soon, too quick, before they really know who you are, before they've actually built up that trust in who you are already, that passion will be misinterpreted. And very often it'll be misinterpreted as desperation. And desperation smells. Desperation never sells. Okay. You want to be really careful about that particular area. So yes, be passionate, but use it sparingly and use it at the right time. And certainly don't use it to try and build trust to start with, because it will come across as the wrong thing. It will come across as desperation. It'll come across as self-interest, because you have not yet overcome that stereotype. They see you as being yet another self-interested salesperson. So you can possibly be passionate. No, you could only ever be self-interested. That's the way they see you. I'm not saying that's the truth, okay? If I give them a really detailed proposal, it'll show that we're more professional than our competitors. I see this probably more than anything else. People who put together a lovingly crafted quotation, a beautiful proposal. It's full of photography, it's full of detail, it's full of stuff that they cannot possibly find out anywhere else. It shows your expertise, it shows how good you are, it shows all the reasons why you should win the business. And it's jammed packed with your intellectual property, the stuff that they cannot find anywhere else, the things that you've gained over 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years of experience in your field. You've just given away all of the family silver and you haven't even charged for it. It's called free consulting. And it's such a common thing to do because, of course, it shows you as being different to all of your competitors. Except what do you think your competitors are doing? They're doing exactly the same thing, which means that your potential client, your prospective client, is now armed with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different proposals, each one of which is jam-packed with information they cannot find anywhere else. It's like they've been given the Haynes manual for rebuilding their business or whatever it is that you do. And you've given it all away for free. I mean, wow. That no wonder you find these buyers then differentiate on the only thing that's left to differentiate on, which is price. Which no wonder you end up in this position where you've been commoditized out of existence. Very often your margin, aspirational margin, is completely unachievable because you basically gave away too much too soon. Okay. If I bond with them over the things I can see in their office or on their Zoom background or their Teams background or whatever it is, then we can find a rapport, we can strike something up, we can build a relationship. Beware. Beware, beware, beware. It's such a difficult area, this one, because the stuff that is in the background, the stuff that's in their office might be there for different reasons than you are assuming. Okay. So if you have got a genuine, authentic interest in one of the things that's in the background, then by all means ask some questions about it, but don't try and bond with them over it exclusively. It's more about the approach you take and the ability that you have to listen to them, make them feel heard and understood and genuinely like you are actually interested in them. Be present in the moment. That's far more valuable than going, oh, I see that you've got a Star Wars action figure in the background, because they're just as likely to say, yeah, I'm in my son's back bedroom and that's that's the only place I could get an internet signal today. And you've effectively fallen flat on your face because you've kind of professed your nerdiness and equated yourself in their eyes to their 4-year-old child. Not necessarily the stamp of credibility you were looking for. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, you might be able to get out of that one. Depends on how charismatic you are. But still, it's not necessarily the right thing to do. If I quote them a competitive price, we can get in at the ground floor and we can put our prices up later. No, 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 and also no. Did I say no? Don't do that. It's a massive act of self-sabotage. You're going in telling them that you can do it that cheaply, and more importantly, far more importantly, you are sending the message to your own brain, which on some level does not know the difference between fantasy and reality. You're sending that message that that's all you're worth. That's all you're worth. That's not a good message for anybody. You add value. You change people's perception of their world, or you change their world in something which is meaningful to them. Your job as a salesperson is not to be in it to win it and take a numbers game approach and win it at all costs, to buy the business by sacrificing your margin. No, your job is to help them to self-discover why it is you add value. And that's a difficult piece of work to do, which is why, when you train a doctor for 7 years and then you give your salesperson like half a day's sales training or a day's sales training, if you're lucky, you're setting yourself up to fail, because you need to go out there and build these relationships in a meaningful way. Okay. If I tell them all the features and benefits of what we do, they will be impressed by my USPs. We've all heard of USPs. These are supposedly unique selling points, but actually are more like universal. Universal is the word that I use, and that's what the U really stands for, because actually so many of these so-called unique selling points all sound bloody identical to each other. Oh, we're local. We care. We really give a great service. Have you ever met somebody who didn't say that they give a great service, even when their service is somewhat suspect? You get a real kind of personal service with us. We genuinely care. You've got these 5 quotes and everybody says the same thing. Now, don't get me wrong. They might be selling points. They might well be real. They're genuine. They're true. But everybody says them. So are they unique? No, they are universal. Okay. So you've got to find something different. And that's got to be about your approach. Certainly your features are just a list of technical specifications that, will describe your product or service, and your benefits are a list of marketing specifications that you've come up with, or your marketing department has come up with, that suggest here are some common reasons why some people might find some value in what we do, but not all of it all of the time. It's presumptuous. And certainly if you go out there with any level of presumptuousness, it comes across as arrogance, and it certainly comes across as self-serving, and it comes about as self-congratulatory and about you. So make it about them, not about you. That's an absolute critical thing. If I bend over backwards for them, they'll see that they really matter to me. No, they won't. They'll see you as a doormat. This is your first 7 seconds. If you go in there like Uriah Heep from Charles Dickens, going, "Oh, be me ever so humble, sir. Please, would you buy my stuff? I'll bend over backwards. I'll be ever so good to you. I'll help you with everything. I'm ever so good." Then guess what? They see you as a crawly little lickspittle who's only ever going to be somebody who is either slightly untrustworthy or slightly self-interested and just going out there to win the business at all costs. Certainly, they're not going to see you as having any self-respect. So why the hell should they have respect for you either? Now, I know that might sound a little harsh, but I'm just saying about the way that the unconscious brain is going to pick up on these cues that you're giving them. It's dangerous. Now, we can obviously work on ourselves to be able to deal with this kind of thing, but making sure that we show up in the right way is critical. And putting the buyer, putting the customer genuinely at the heart of our focus is the first and most important step of this thing. Because if you show up in any way looking for an outcome for yourself, then that will come across in the way in which you approach things. You've got to go in there working out whether or not it even makes sense for them, for you to be talking to them at all. So make it about them, not about you. That's my top tip for today. Okay. I'm going to leave you with one last thing. And this is my favorite cognitive bias. Yes, because I am that sort of sad person. You can see I've got a brain in the background there. Some people would say that's the only brain in this office, but still, I'm interested in psychology. And for me, I think having a grounding in human interaction and human psychology is absolutely critical, because human beings are generally pretty rubbish at understanding themselves. Even those of us that have done quite a lot of work with psychology, we're still on a voyage of daily discovery about how we can actually understand ourselves and other people better. But here's one of the things that we might be setting ourselves up for failure with when we start giving away too much information too quickly. I mentioned free consulting. So what does that look like? Now, this is a thing that we call the Dunning-Kruger effect. If you've never come across this before, then you're in for a treat. This is great because it's such a telling example of how it is that we're actually self-sabotaging. And also, worse, we are not doing our best work on our client's behalf or our prospective client's behalf, because we're setting them up to make the wrong decisions. Because ultimately, if we genuinely believe that we're the best in the business at doing what it is that we do, and that actually our clients are poorer for it when they don't have us in their lives, then fundamentally we are setting them up for a position where they make the wrong decision based on the wrong criteria. Why is that? Because when you have a little bit of knowledge, then that's a dangerous thing. What's the old Alexander Pope quote? A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Yeah. I mean, it might win you, a couple of rounds on a quiz show, but life is not a quiz show. Okay. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. So your confidence in your ability initially, when somebody first gives you a bit of information, maybe a few very well crafted quotes and proposals, the sorts of things that I was talking about earlier on, your confidence in your ability as a buyer starts to shoot through the roof. Okay. Certainly your confidence at that stage massively overreaches your actual capability, your actual competency, your actual ability, and your actual knowledge. Okay. And this is a place that we call the peak of Mount Stupid, because that's the place where you're going to make all the worst possible decisions you could possibly make, because you're overconfident and undereducated on something. Okay. Now, as you get to know a little bit more, you plunge down into a lower level of confidence, which is perhaps a little bit more reflective of your actual expertise and ability and everything else. And that's an area that we will call the valley of despair, because it comes with it a little bit of self-flagellation. You're kind of beating yourself up for how arrogant you were about 10 minutes ago before you realize just how much you didn't know about this particular area of expertise. Okay. Now, over time, of course, you start to climb up with your actual knowledge. You start to gain a little bit more experience and a bit more ability, and your competency starts to grow, and your confidence will start to grow as well, but at a much more measured, sensible pace this time. And this is what we call the slopes of enlightenment. Now, it may even be as you start to crest the top of the slopes of enlightenment that your actual ability starts to be a lot higher than your confidence level. And this is a thing we call imposter syndrome, where you end up with a lot more ability than you actually think you have. Okay. And then eventually that kind of levels off, and it's what we call the plateau of sustainability. But very often that plateau of sustainability might still be at a lower level of confidence than you had right at the very beginning of this thing, which is why you find poorly informed people who have a high degree of, shall we say, confidence are not necessarily the ones that you should be listening to. And yet they very often have the loudest voices. So that kind of expertise is not always quite reflected in confidence level. And that's a dangerous thing, obviously, for obvious reasons. Now, if any of that resonates with you at all, if any of that is sounding useful, or if you'd like to know a little bit more about this kind of thing, or even some sort of replicable processes and I suppose some bits around your mindset that you might be able to adopt or help your sales team to adopt to be able to avoid some of these challenges, then please do give me a little bit of a direct message me on LinkedIn, message me on YouTube, message me on Facebook, whatever it is that you want to do, or give me a call on 07715 269 724. I'll be happy to have a chat with you. I've got no expectation you're going to become a client, because one thing's for sure is we are not a fit for everybody. We are not a fit for everybody. But what I will do is have a conversation with you to work out whether or not the sorts of things that we do might be of some benefit in your world. And if they are, well, great. Maybe we will actually start some sort of a business relationship with us. But it's going to be only if it's relevant to both parties and if it works for both of us. Okay. So please give us a conversation if it's of relevance to you. I'll be very happy at the very least to invite you along to one of these free masterclasses that I'm doing over the next couple of months. And hopefully that has been of some kind of use or benefit to you. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon, the next time I put out a live stream. Thank you very much indeed.